Welcome everyone to another episode of Aligned as Fuck. I am super excited. I mean, I really seriously am coming out of my skin excited because my guest is not only one of the most amazing badasses I know, she is also one of my dearest friends. And anytime we get in a space that we get to play, magic just like happens, and like we never know what rabbit hole we're going to go down, and we're just going to shoot the shit on every level today. So before we do that, and before my excitement literally comes out of every pore of my body, let me introduce you to my friend Maruxa Murphy. Maruxa is, seriously, she is a fucking badass, and I am so excited she's here. So first of all, let me just say, hey, Maruxa, it's so good to have you.
I love being here with you, Candy. It's my favorite. I can't wait to shoot the shit with you.
I know. We always, and it's honestly one of the reasons why I brought her on the show, because anytime we engage, we're like, we should have recorded that. Like even just a catch-up call. And before I tell you a little bit more about Maruxa, the last time we talked, it was either the last time or the time before, I swear to God, Maruxa and I had laid out a landscape of how we were going to bring the next Mr. Rogers neighborhood to life. And by the way, I'm still really jealous because at some point she can share the story with you. She had the opportunity to meet Mr. Rogers. And so like the fact that she just has an affinity for that type of human being is why she's such a soul sister. But let me tell you some of her credentials and some of what else makes her just this legendary badass. She is an award-winning community experience designer, strategist, entrepreneur, author, and catalyst for change, who has been transforming communities in person and online since 2000. Let me tell you, when you say communities, Maruxa is the freaking queen. She is without a doubt the queen of knowing how to really leverage access and like raise the consciousness of a community in a way that is going to serve greater impact and influence change. I've seen her do it. I cannot wait to talk more about what she's up to. That being said, she leads national and international initiatives with a deep understanding of the dynamics of how people connect and share information. She is further changing the game in the community experience design while working in the travel business, personal development, parenting, and coaching industries, shifting how communities can be designed from the inside out to transform their industries at the core. She is working with some big time clients. They include people like Netflix spiciest show, Sex, Love, and Goop stars, Jaiya, and Ian Ferguson, and the Erotic Blueprints. Seriously, she's playing in some seriously big spaces. She is working with Uplift Millions brand, Spryte Loriano with Awakening Giants, multiple metaverses, as well as creating and designing communities for brands, revolutionizing, I cannot say that word, their industries like Maui Resort community, the Women's Prosperity Network, the Vision School, the Traveling Diary, and Conscious Dancer Membership Experience with former Rockette dancer Gina Pero. I mean, seriously, where is she not showing up right now? Maruxa specializes in bringing people together to create profitable enterprises that do good in the world, while empowering the individuals to live their fullest. Her work has been featured in Forbes, Reader's Digest, Fox News, the Huffington Post, NBC, and the Austin American-Statesman, as well as featured as one of the 10 women-owned brands to be on the lookout as the United Nations on Women's Entrepreneur Day 2019. Okay, I'm just going to cry because first of all, every time, and I could go on, by the way, y'all, I have like 3 pages of how fucking badass she is, and I'm just going to let you experience it because I'm not kidding when I say I love Maruxa Murphy. I mean, I love. And so right now, even, I want to start crying because the magnitude of what you're creating, the magnitude of what you have very clearly committed and chosen is your path, is not only you, but it is the communities that you are bringing to life. And so I would love to start there with you. Like I said at the beginning, before we were just kind of shooting some shit, I'm like, I don't even know where I want this call to go. I want to talk about community. I want to start with your definition of community and why communities are so compelling for the work that you do, because I think it's huge.
Great. So first and foremost, I am in such good company because when I see you, Candy Barone, I'm like, mother effer, like you are so brilliant. You're such a bright light in the world. And to be able to do this shoot the shit episode with you, I'm like, I cannot wait to see what we concoct by the end of this call. Like, and this time together, and people get to pay attention to see what shows up. Like, I'm so thrilled about that. But thank you for your kind words, truly, as well. Like, that's really, really special to know how loved I am by you. Because I feel the same way about you.
Have a crying fest today. Okay.
So, but to answer your question, community, I love that question. And I'm so glad that that's how we're opening, because the truth is, I think the word community is such a bastardized and overused word today. To be frank, let's just get into it.
Let's just get that shit on the level for sure.
And the reason for that is because everybody knows, especially after the pandemic, we all know how deeply we need community, right? Like, we forgot how deeply we need community because we were so used to being in community prior to the pandemic. And then we get that taken away from us. And we're in our own bubbles, and we're in our own silos, and we're in, some of us as individual solo, some of us with small families, some of us with a lot of people that we didn't like. And we realized in all of that how deeply important touch is, a smile, the energetic exchange of a hug, or just being in the same room with somebody that matters. And we got used to doing it online. We got used to bringing this experience online and trying to figure out, how do we do this well? Because we can't have the in-person experience. So in one way, this idea of community is in its heyday. Like, we're expanding this definition. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to innovate in the midst of being human. Humans need human connection. Yes. That is without a doubt. And in the most basic of terms, community is when two or more people come together to deepen relationship around something that they're interested in. And that could be something that is in the B2B space. It could be a business reason. It could be that we're all part, Kajabi, this company called Kajabi is one of my clients. I'm helping them deepen their community relationship with their users and the brand. It could be you, me, and some of our friends in Austin, Texas, hanging out. That's community as well. Right? So in the most basic terms, it's where two or more people connect and want to deepen relationship or thoughts around a specific topic. So basic, right?
Yeah.
Now, that to be said, there's also then how does that look like? How does community look like online? How does community look like in the business form? How does it look like? And there's so many ways, but with that most basic concept of community, we can now start to think, well, then how do we do that well in all these other spaces with all these other tools and all these other new fandangled ways that community can be created, right? So we really have had the opportunity now in the last about 3 years to really innovate community and expand its meaning. The other thing, though, that's happened, why I'm saying it's been bastardized, is because things like audience building have also been put and coined into the term of community building. And they're really just very two different things. And I think it's important, if it's okay with you, for me to identify what those are.
Please, I was just going to say, actually, even before we go deeper, I would love, because I do think there's a lot of, energetically, there's a lot of difference, and there's a nuance and definition difference. And I know when you and I first had this conversation, when you were talking about how audience building is different than community building, I think it's really important that we dig in there. I really think, in light of some other questions that are starting to pop, that I'm like, oh, I got so much I want to ask. Yes, could you shine a light on what is the difference and what are the nuances between the two?
Sure, absolutely, most definitely. So to me, they are very different, right? And we think about it, like if we're all of us here, who are listening, watching, or we're all business builders in some way, shape, or form, right? And we've been told many times, hey, be on social media, build your community. So where that gets kind of tangled is really in the intentionality, of what each does. So when we think about audience, I want you to think about for a moment here, audience building as a one-directional conversation between you as the business owner or the expert, having a conversation to create an aha moment with the person listening or watching that content exchange, right? That's in essence audience building. So that can happen in a multitude of ways. If you have a TikTok channel, you creating a video, sharing a concept, having the person at the other end have an aha moment, signing up for your free gift, audience building. You being on a podcast, sharing an idea or a concept, same thing, free gift, audience building, right? Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, like your profile, your Facebook business page, your, what else? YouTube channel, right? Writing a book. All audience building. All of that is audience building, right? It's you articulating concepts outwardly to create an awareness and aha, and then them on the other end of that aha saying, oh my gosh, yes, this, I want more of this. I want to understand this more. So that's audience building, right? A lot of people, like I said, that they've been saying it's community because that's the phrase of the day. But let's get that clear that that's not it. Community again then goes into that one, instead of just a one-way conversation, one directional, it's now a multi-directional conversation. So, right now we have a community of 2 on this call, right? Like you and I are going to be riffing back and forth, shooting the shit. If let's say our really good friend, who do we want to invite into the conversation?
Let's invite Sherry. We'll invite Sherry English because the 3 of us have played on in a way to be a community before. She's a good example of someone who would come join us and play.
Perfect. So then she comes in and she's like, hey, Candy, hey, Maruxa, what's going on? What are you guys talking about? And we're like, oh my gosh, Sherry, we're having this great conversation about community. And she's like, no way, guess what? I have this idea. And then she jumps into the conversation. And then let's say one of our other friends, Megan comes in and is like, hey, I heard you guys over there talking about community. Yeah, this is super interesting. But you know what? I'm building this amazing skincare line. And here's how I'm building community. She's jumping in. See what I'm saying? Now it's a party. Now it's us going back and forth. We're taking ideas, we're expanding them, we're riffing off on them, we're improvising, we're deepening our relationship to the interest at hand, whatever that is. So in this case, community, conversation around community. So that's what community is, you see? And so now that we understand that it is really about the people in the room, then we have to also then identify the third piece, which is the room, right? A lot of times people will say to me, oh, well, I have a Facebook group, so therefore I have a community. No. Unless your community is actually having conversations, you just have a Facebook group with people in it looking at each other going, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
How you doing?
Right. But there's something really powerful about that. And I really want to settle that for a minute, because I think there's people that are hearing that maybe for the first time. There is a very interactive, engaged, energetic exchange when you're talking about community. There is a feedback response, so to speak, when it's an audience, right? To your point, it's one directional and I'm giving feedback or I'm giving a response. I'm taking action. I'm doing something with it. I'm either listening, but it's a very feedback response kind of environment where when you talk about community, there is this energetic dynamic that happens that says, because I think, to your point, there's all the people that come into the party. And I love that the people we called out, and by the way, if they're listening, Sherry and Megan, I love that we called you both out because you are community builders for sure. And so much fun. And seriously, we all need to get together, but that's a side note. But I think about, you talk about it's the people that are in the dialogue, in the exchange, in the space. It's the environment. But I would also add the third piece, as I'm hearing you say that, it's the energy. It's the energetic codes and exchange, and because there's so much, and this is where, because I'd love to talk about the difference between how that works online, like you and I, like there's an aspect of you I can feel, and I so want to hug you and feel like, all right, I'm hugging you right now, it, and it's not the same as. So how does that dynamic play when that energy, because there's a tangible energy between us right now, but it is nothing like, and I know because Maruxa and I have done stuff in the same room in a community together that's been like, it's lit up, y'all. It is just fucking lit up. Not that this isn't lit up, but I'm just saying you and I in a room can literally make things fall off the walls. It's that kind of energy. how do we tap into that, and how does it differ in a virtual space versus because there's still people still hesitant to engage in full capacity in those communities the way that we've known them. And so I guess the question's kind of twofold, is what are we pulling through over the last 3 years that have been sort of the observation around what we forgot, to use your phrase from before, what we forgot about community, what we need to remember and pull through, and how does that then play out in virtual, live, and this new, the new term of the day, hybrid model we all live in. How does that play out? I mean, how does community do
really play?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I love it. And so I'm going to preface that with it. There's nothing better than in person, right? There's nothing better than in person. Why do we do business? We do more business because of, in my opinion, I've done more business with people that I've actually met in person than I've ever done with just online meetings. So let's get that clear. Like there's never, and that's why, by the way, and this is a whole different subject, but that's why I truly believe, like with everything happening now with AI, a lot of us are afraid, right? And there's a sense of needing to be afraid of, like, oh my God, are the robots literally going to take over the world?
Right.
There's a whole conversation that we could have on that. But the point is that nothing can replace human to human interaction. And so let's be really clear about that. That is still like the golden, the golden standard of what we should be thinking about, is like, how do we create more opportunities for in-person? How do we design it? Now, also on the other side, like you mentioned, like so many of us have deepened relationships or created relationships for the first time with people we've never met in person. And they're just as lovely and amazing and valuable, right? And you get so giddy excited to meet in person for the first time because of what has been created in the virtual space. So I want us to be let ourselves for this moment, like embody or like feel in to those meetings that we've had in person that we're just like, God, I loved meeting that person, whoever that person was. Could be your sister, your best friend, your colleague, whatever, like that feels really good. And then also those moments, if you've had them, where you're now feeling that like people that you've gotten to know and love and adore simply because you've gotten to know them online, but in a deeper way, right? Like feel into both of that. Yeah. We've all had, most of us, if not all of us, have had those experiences where that level of expansion is possible. I think the big piece around both of them is that when we take either of them to the extremes, it's exhausting, right? And so recognizing also that there's that energetic play that happens, and we went from in person prior to the pandemic to the point where some of my very introverted friends were like, I was good.
Well, I thought I was an extrovert, and I got to tell you, the first 2 years of the pandemic, I was like, oh my God, I can fucking like just hide and not, oh God, the introvert in me has had its heyday. It's getting a little antsy again, but I did not realize how deep that introvertedness was until given the opportunity to not be on the road all the time. And now it's created a whole like discernment around, I don't know if I want to be in that energy right now. Like, because that's my other layer that I want to add in this, is I'm hearing you say that because I'm curious, because there is the whole extrovert, introvert, and all of us have both, by the way. There's a duality, and it just depends on which leads and what spaces. We all have spaces we get charged by people, and we all have spaces that we need recharge. And some of us think we're extroverted, or we're extroverted introverts, or whatever, because we've been conditioned and we've been taught that way. And I love Simon Sinek even said, just because I have big energy doesn't make me an extrovert. I have extremely huge energy, and I am like the epitome of an introvert, and I know it shocks people. So there's that piece, but there's also a piece that I found, and I found this, and maybe it's the introversion. There's a space of vulnerability that feels safer or more transparent. Maybe not. I'm curious because I want to just I don't even know, again, just letting shit fly on, like, we'll see where the hell we go in a rabbit hole. Where does vulnerability, I'm just going to put it out there, I'm not even going to offer my biased whatever's channeling through right now. Where does vulnerability fit in this, as we're talking about community and energetics of online versus in person.
Oh my
I
God.
feel like I'm seeing some things, and a lot of it for me is mapped to how people charge, what space feels like. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that, because all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I think we need to talk about some vulnerability in this space. Because
Well, yeah, I'm wanting to chomp at the bit because I've never been asked that question, and I love that question. I think for me, what came up immediately was, well, vulnerability is an act of courage. So that means to me that let's just take it another step back again. When we're building community, what I believe is, as visionaries and leaders who are choosing to build these communities for these beautiful conversations to take place, vulnerability can only be received and held up as long as us, as the leaders who are responsible for the container being built, are willing to go there. Right. And so if me as a leader am willing to share my story, or to call out when I just don't know and I need help, and I share that with my community, instead of trying to play like this big, like I've got it all together, here's my, here's I'm all together now, like, and put this slap that fake smile on, then our community will feel that energetically. It doesn't matter if it's online or if it's in person, it just is felt. Right. So we are making a courageous choice to choose vulnerability. And when we do, what often happens is, especially as you've been deepening your relationship with your community can receive that well, and then choose to courageously act from that space of vulnerability themselves too, because we were charged with designing the way in which our communities are run, with a culture in which our communities are run.
Yeah, and I love that. I love the way you just said that. I love that just came through.
Yeah. I think we, one thing in my own personal life, I've been recognizing, having been from a family of performers, is that it's very easy to fake vulnerability. Sad.
It's interesting that you say that, because I've said for a while, and I found that through this pandemic, and especially in light, I mean, I launched a podcast episode from last week that was about sort of this idea of spiritual, because I want to actually bring that in, and feeling a couple questions or things I just want to throw and see what happens. One being the space of, I think about community, and it's bringing me back to a conversation I just had around spiritual shaming, snobbery, superiority, and this containers that are being created. Because I think there's also, to your point, not only is there courage and vulnerability, but I do think there is a performative vulnerability that's happening right now in a lot of spaces. And my assistant and I were getting really charged up about that a couple of weeks ago, where I'm like, there's this performative vulnerability where people show up and say, I'm so vulnerable, yet it's like 14,000 filters and it's this and this and that. And I'm like, that's not vulnerable. That is a staged performance level vulnerability, your vulnerability. And sometimes there's that line, and, thinking about Brene Brown talking about, there's a line between vulnerability and oversharing. And I think there's places where we overshare and think we're being vulnerable, and we're doing it to get feedback that is validation. It's to be seen. It's recognition. It's not vulnerability for the sake of, I'm trying to create impact or have a conversation. So I've got a couple of things I want to throw out and see what your thoughts are. Don't know what I think. It's just the questions coming through. One, is it fair to say, or is this way off base, or is it not, and something else? Is it fair to say that community, the bottom line of ground community, is it's around connection and conversation or communication? It's around creating a space for those two things to have breath.
Yes, I love how you said that. Yes, absolutely. Those two things, conversation and connection, have breath. Yes. And for it to then nurture one another, nourish one another, and deepen, right? And if we think about, like, I want to invite right now, like, all of us to put ourselves in that beautiful space of a community that you've loved. And it could be your family or not. It could be a co-working experience like I had in Austin when I lived there. It could be a whatever sorority, I don't know, whatever community is popping through for you. Like, and just allow yourself to feel in how good that felt to be a part of that community.
Yeah.
Right? Those were the elements, right? Connection, conversation. And I would actually add, there's these four, what I call the sacred four. There's
Mm.
these four core elements that I believe that nurtured and loving communities can have. So it's more than just community. Community can be bad, good, ugly, indifferent.
Yeah,
right?
which was where my other question is going to lead, but yes.
Yeah, and so that being said, like, if we do, we want to design one that's more intentional, that's loving, that's kind, that's uplifting, I would encourage to add the sacred four elements into that, you know. And those elements are, the first one always is to create a safer space, a space that we can never control whether or not someone, I always say safer, actually, I used to say safe space. But then I'm working with the Erotic Blueprints, Jaiya and Ian Ferguson with the Sex, Love, and Goop. They helped me realize, like, you can't actually say that, because you can't
make that decision for someone else, right? Yeah.
That being said, we can articulate our intention for creating safer spaces, right? And that looks like a multitude of different ways. Safety, actually, I believe, comes in, it's not only, what's said here stays here, but it also comes in the minute you hit the, I want to join this community button, right? Or I want to buy this product. That onboarding process, I know it sounds so funny, but literally the onboarding process on the back of that thank you page, the minute they hit that button is the first moment that they're going to have regret that they made a decision one way or the other. So what is it that we can do to create a safer experience to help them feel like, oh my gosh, I just made the right investment into myself, into whatever the purchase was, right? So looking at that process, and how do we hold their hand through that onboarding process to be able to be a part of the community and feel like when they walk in and they look around the room, that they're okay. They might feel a little uncomfortable. They don't know all the things yet, but they're okay. They're held. We got you. Right?
Well, and there's a difference, right? So let's pause there for a minute, because I love that we're going to go deep on these sacred four. And there's a difference, because I love that you just threw uncomfortable out, because one of my intentions, I will say, as a leader, is you're going to be uncomfortable. Safety and uncomfortable are not the same thing. Feeling safe to be uncomfortable is an intention I set. And so I think it's really important to say that, because people will say, well, I'm uncomfortable. Doesn't mean you're not safe. It means, because here's the thing, in a lot of communities that have, in my opinion, that have the responsibility and the right intention and are creating a space for people to choose to feel safe in their own vulnerability, it's going to challenge the shit out of you, because it's designed to push you out of the limiting beliefs and the comfort zone and the stuff that you're bouncing up against. That I actually make a promise for people coming in. I do it, whether it's my live events or I promise, I do it in my corporate events. I am going, before I even start the one of the things I do to set the container is, I am going to make you all a promise. You will feel uncomfortable in our time together. I will also take an inventory and gauge at certain points to make sure. If not, I will level up, because we are not going to do the work that's required unless I get you. But there's a safety in that, because there's a space that says, I'm being very clear around what you get to expect. So I just wanted to pause there, because there is a huge difference between people will say, I don't feel safe. Is it that you don't feel safe, or you don't feel comfortable?
That's right. And you also made a mention of, you, even before they get into the container, you're already setting that stage, right? So that's a really, really important piece too. Sometimes people forget how important that is. We don't set the stage well enough for what's to come. So when people come into, and that's my point of the safer. It doesn't mean uncomfortability is a bad or a good thing or a bad thing. It just means let's prep them for what's to come, so that when they get there, they know they're going to get uncomfortable.
There's a transparency in the expectations we're setting, right? And I think there's a fear for people that are taking the opportunity to create those containers. I think this is where we're feeling some of the stuff that feels like either performative vulnerability, or doesn't feel maybe an integrity with what someone's saying, is they're afraid to be that honest and transparent around what their container is providing and not. They either think they got to be the end all be all for everything, or they want to be like, well, it's going to be safe and it's going to be nice. And it's like, then you're going to bring people in and they come in and it's something totally different. Don't do a bait and switch. And yet people have a fear of articulating, this is, I mean, I know, and again, I do things a little bit differently, but I'm really clear, even in my like launch and my landing page, here's who's for me. And let me be really clear who's not right for this container. If you want me to handhold you, I mean, I am like very over the top sometimes direct, but I'm like, you actually will do more harm than good to yourself and the others in the community. If you come in thinking you can play at this level and you're not prepared for what this level is going to require of you, right. Let me be really clear that this is not a container for everybody. I have other tools and resources that you can access. If I need you to be really clear to be able to say the fuck yes that says this is the right, yeah, it scares the shit out of me. Okay, probably part of the right yes. And I'm ready to do the work required to step up to that level of uncomfortable. Because I do think people do one of two things. They either generalize so much that it feels really, I don't know, like you don't know what you're coming in. So you're kind of just like curious. And then you're like, whoa, that wasn't anything I thought it was. Right. Or you want to bring people in. So you're saying one thing and the minute they come in, it's like you gutted them and cut them off. And it feels really icky and it feels out of integrity, right?
Yeah. And I would add to the safer piece, share, like you mentioned it, but just to be clear, to make sure everyone gets it, like share those guidelines, share what creates that container for safety to be able to flourish, right? And when we do that, then people can just walk in and be like, I'm her, I'm here, let's go, what's going to happen, right? And they can be fully aligned in. The second of the sacred four is, so we have safe and then we have seen, helping them seen. So seen, right? I mean, think again, go back to that community where you felt completely yourself in, you could be so all of you in that community. And you probably were seen then, right? Like being seen is one of the best gifts we can give people. Mm-hmm. Whether it's being seen because they did something really well and you highlight the heck out of them, mm-hmm. or you're being seen because you're new to the group and you want people want to know you and they want to get to understand a little bit more about you. Sometimes it's intimidating for some people, right? But it's being seen in all of the ways. It also can look like, if you're creating an online community, it could be tagging people in to posts, maybe a conversation about, let's say, you, Sherry, and I are having a conversation about how to create authentic communities, right? And then we just found out that our friend Carissa from another place another place in the community is also having an authentic community conversation in her space. Well, what if we just tag her into this conversation? Whoever's the leader and that knows that all these conversations are going on, we can bring all of us into one space. We're all seen in this conversation. And also we're creating new levels of engagement, new opportunities for more to bubble forth into life, right? So that's just a simple example, some simple examples of creating seenness in community. And it's also giving voice. Like really, if I had when I design communities, I always try to design it where the leader only does 20% of the talking. The talking, the content, the voice should really be 80% from your people in your community, right? That's what leaders do well in community, is host the party. Mm-hmm. They're the ones to deepen the relationship and the conversation, but then allow those sparks to actually land, or allow the seeds to actually plant and germinate. That is what we can do well as leaders. That's what creates groundswell.
Well, and I love that. And the one thing I want to comment on in that is the fact that you have the being seen after the creating safer environments, because the human dichotomy we all are faced with. And again, it goes back to that vulnerability and that ability to feel safe enough to be seen in who we are, because we have as human beings sort of the both sides of the sword, right? It's I want one person to truly see me for who I am, And then on the flip side, we're like, oh my God, I hope no one sees me for who I really am, right? And so if you don't have that first sacred component of building a community that which says people feel they can choose to be safe, that being seen can have a whole different kind of energy, because being seen in a space that's not safe, I would offer, is probably one of the fastest ways to erode and break down trust within that community. But think about it, there are communities where you're like, oh, you're seen, and you're like, whoa,
Who are you guys?
be seen in that way. I don't want that much recognition and exposure because you haven't earned that trust with me to be seen at that level. And so I think that there's also a spectrum in that as we create safety, if we expect people are going to come in and share their fullest, deepest, most vulnerable thing out of that, because I've been in some of those groups where you show up and they're like, so tell me your biggest trauma. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, dude, I get you got a container. I get you know my name. I get I signed up, but no, pass. And I've exited myself out of those groups because even if there was stuff I wanted in it, I felt so violated that wasn't the spectrum of safety that builds the trust. Because even Brene Brown talks about that, right? All vulnerability is not to be shared, and there is a level of trust required for people to receive your vulnerability. And we have got to make sure we're doing the due diligence, that it's not just safety check. All right, now we're just gonna see people and we're gonna like open the kimono and be like, okay, y'all just step forward and like show it all. That's intimidating. And there are people that go from 0 to 100. And I just want to call that out because as you say that, I love that there is safer. And then and the meaning it's an ongoing, continuous spectrum of safety that's being created.
That's right.
And then there's an environment where you get to be seen at the level appropriate for how to be seen and recognized in that space, right?
So good, right? Like, you're 100% right. I remember when I was learning about group processes, when I got my master's in counseling, mental health counseling, and we were understanding how do you hold space for a group. Let's say we were running a group of like teenage, kids who are, and well, I'll share a specific group I did run at one point. There was a group of teenage kids that were the delinquents, they're all the bad kids, and they had anger issues and all this stuff. Well, can you imagine going in and trying to run a group and being like, hey guys, my name is Maruxa, and guess what? Like today we're going to talk about our feelings. What? You kind of have to set up the stage a little bit. And you're 100% right. If you don't create that place where safety is part of the energy that's brought forth, and designing it, to your point, safer spaces longer term, like ongoing, and that is like the air that we're breathing is creating the safety on an ongoing basis, then we actually have we've missed the whole thing. You can't create support people in being seen if they don't feel safe to be seen. So let's make sure that that's in place, right? And then we dive into this third one, which is feeling heard. So safe, seen, heard is the third sacred component. And in feeling heard, it's when people have that sense of safety and that sense of that they know that they're a part of the community, it's likely that they're more willing to say, hey, I have an idea, or, I have some feedback to give you. What do you think about this? And so it is, to your point earlier, like it is a progressional thing, and giving that space for people when they are heard, when they are courageous and they raise their hand or they tell their truth, and it doesn't feel very resonant to what's going on in your room or in your vision or whatever. How do we hold space for that person? How do we recognize that in our differences of how we see things, we can also be gracious about it?
Wouldn't you say, though, that as a facilitator and someone who intentionally creates containers and holds that space, that is one of the biggest challenges of leadership, is to hold space for all of the uncomfortable tangents and ways things get off the rails. And when someone does choose to take that vulnerability to share a truth that may not be aligned in the conversation that's happening, how do you allow for that space so that they feel held, but also bring the group back so it doesn't completely like why? Because again, one person's truth may feel like a whole lot of oversharing and like inappropriate, and why the hell did that just get put into this space? How do you diffuse that, right? I feel like it is one of the ongoing, and again, as a trainer and coach, that came a lot more naturally to me than the facilitator side of things. I personally think that that is one of the most challenging leadership positions to be in, is to not fix it, to not overstep your authority, to not take over that 20% you're talking about, and sort of let the energy find its way. Ooh, and it takes being willing to take responsibility for your part and leaving the rest where it needs to be left.
They're literally just this piece we can talk about for hours, right? Because you're 100% right. I mean, when we're building communities, let's say we're building an in-person workshop, right? Part of it, the way in which the herd piece can be facilitated well is, again, in some of those other areas that we just spoke about, safer, seen, creating it where we share those guidelines. This is how we share. This is how we share well. And so really designing it so that, because we know as the facilitators of those experiences what's about to show up, setting the stage in an appropriate way without having to tell all the details of what's about to happen, how to then hold that space for the people as their stuff comes up, as the bubbles come up. Now, when you're in an online space, then it gets even more fun, right? I know you and I both have run groups where things can go crazy.
The freaking elephant came in and squashed everybody. You're like, what? Ooh, take a breath. And because that you're on camera, I find it's even worse because everyone is watching your reaction. And I'm a heart sleeve kind of person that my initial what the fuck sometimes comes forward where I'm like, ooh, no emotion, no register, just because even when you do clearly sometimes set those expectations around, this is how we share, there's always, not always, there are oftentimes the, what do I want to call it? The Lone Ranger that comes in and decides, I wasn't listening. I'm going to say it my way, not playing by the rules, which again, I've had conversations with people offline about that, where I'm like, again, I'm going to reiterate, this is the way we share. If you're going to choose not to, I'm going to ask you to leave the community, because if it's a repeat thing, I'm going to have a conversation. In the moment though, as a facilitator, how do you hold space, grace? And I'm asking this one because I'm just curious what you do, because I know you and I both, because of the kind of communities we run, things get lit up sometimes, and there's especially when it's intentionally designed to challenge people, to push them out of those spaces of security that oftentimes are the story they think make them feel safe, but it's that security blanket, and we're trying to rip it from their fingers gently, sometimes not so gently in my case, and shit comes up, like the triggers come up. There is a real fine dance and art. Yeah. Like I said, I am just going to be really transparent. That is a place I am forever learning and in process, because every time I'm like, got that one, somebody comes and like brings the one that I'm like, and I know I had a 3-day event right before the pandemic happened that literally I was like, I feel like you're going to get, I had a conversation, I prayed, I was having, setting my intention. I'm like, I feel like this is going to push me. I think you're really pushing me as a leader and a facilitator. And I swear to God, it wasn't even 20 minutes into a 3-day event that I set the container and someone lost their shit in my event, that everything I did, that I literally took a break after. So I went in the bathroom, like, would I've handled that any differently? How do I feel about this? I'm like, no, I'm clean. I'm good. But I was like, dude, I know. I was like, I'm going to be 20 minutes out of the gate for a 3-day event. If you're doing this in the first half hour, I'm going to need some reinforcements, which fortunately I had a team around me that then said, Candy is not available on breaks. Candy is not available, because I already knew that if that was happening in the first 20 minutes of a 3-day event, it was game on, and I was going to be challenged in every way possible as a facilitator, which meant I was going to need more self-care through the process.
Yeah, for sure. So that's actually really critical. You just said self-care. I mean, that's like those are the magical words for me. So two things. Holding a container for people where even when everything is like laid out just the right way, you expect it to go that way. First and foremost, as a facilitator, the one thing I learned is always have plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E, plan F.
All the way to Z and then the alphabet again, right? Yeah.
Be okay with having to be flexible, right? Go with the flow. And I think that really came from my background as a therapist, right? You never know what was about to happen in that room, ever. And so having that skill set of practicing flow, be in the flow with the members in the room, the yes and approach to improvisation helps diffuse a lot of times the issue at hand, and is able to then support that person in a more offline or off the camera way after, right? If it for whatever reason doesn't seem to be diffusing the situation, going into that plan C and plan D of having people in the community to be able to support them, be like, hey, you know what? While Candy is in the midst of this right now, you know what? Let's go and have a conversation in a private breakout room, right, on Zoom. Or it could be that they're just being unruly, like totally disrespectful. And in those moments, we're gonna let you go. Thank you so much for being here. And we're gonna let you leave the room now. Thanks. And then we let them go. I've never had to do that. Knock on wood. I never have to.
Once in a live space, I had to. That was it.
Yeah. And even so, right? What do we do after that? Like, really, you recognize that the entire room is feeling the energy of what just happened. And so one of the things I love to do in any of those types of situations, so I've had to do that many times in more virtual experiences and in live, but not like on a Zoom training or anything. But my point being is to just recognize what just happened, right? Articulate like everybody like, wow, that just happened. All right, let's take in some deep breaths, guys, right? And then really support everyone, maybe have a break, maybe take some time to go back into self-care, right? The other thing that I often see, especially in like online forums, Facebook groups, we've run very heated Facebook groups in the past.
And sometimes, yes.
Yeah. and they're exhausting, right? When it gets super heated. Now, one of the things I really love, it can get exhausting, I should say. One of the things I think that's so critical on this point of being heard is to, again, go forward with your self-care. Know when you need to have boundaries, know when you need to say no, know when you need to invite somebody else in to support you in the group and supporting the community. Also getting clear on the guidelines to be able, again, just like we would do in a live experience, in a virtual one, what are the guidelines to make this community work?
Yeah.
With this one particular community that I run in Austin called the Austin Moms Network, they're an amazing community, and we believe it takes a village to raise a mom. So we wanted to create a group to raise the mom, just like we often hear to raise the child. And in that, if you've ever heard of mom groups, most of them have this stereotype that it's all drama all the time. It's this like very fractional space where all the organically, only organic eating moms hang, and the ones that their kids formula hang together. And so I was not going to have that in this community. I was like, there is no way in hell I'm going to run a community and waste my time on drama. So I created the Drama Mama Llama. And because there's a book called the Mama Llama, yeah, Mama Llama. Gosh, my kids are 8 and 14 now. Sorry, but anyway, so at that time, we would read this book, the series on the for the Mama Llama or whatever, Llama. It was called Llama Llama. Anyway, so I made the Drama Mama Llama, and it was this. And every time there was like some sort of drama that wanted to bubble up, we were like, we just posted the picture of the drama, the pink Drama Mama Llama, and they were like,
But there's something really powerful in that, because I was going to add the thing that I think facilitators forget sometimes, and especially those that create the container, boundaries are critical. You get to decide what you're available for and what you're not. I have been very clear that is not on the table for this discussion. That is not part of what we agreed to coming in. I've been very clear to shut it down before it even has air. And I will see you to say, I heard you say that. And you were very clear that those are not the guidelines we set. That isn't, we're not available for that. That conversation, that, or you know what, we're going to parking lot that because it doesn't have anything to do with this situation. Or if it's something that's my trigger, I'm like, to your point, I need to take a breath. The only way that this conversation can, you know what, before we even go deeper in this, I'm going to say we're going to take a 10-minute break. Everybody come back, because it already diffuses that out. And it gives the facilitator the space to say, do I want to respond? How do I want to respond? And to what degree do I want to respond? But at any time as a facilitator, if you don't feel safe, you get to say no. And it doesn't need to be justified. It doesn't need to be validated. You get to say, no, that's not happening in this room today.
That's it.
And change the subject, and literally move. As a facilitator, you can put a fork in something and say, that is not, we're not going down that path today. I appreciate your share, and we are not going down that path today. So into the next conversation that we were going to drive, let's get some feedback around da 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 da. And you literally just, you acknowledge and you create the boundary and you move. And I think facilitators sometimes, and I see this more in the virtual space than I do the live, is I'm not sure they've set the right intention going in to make sure their energy is clear, to stay in their own integrity. Because too many of us are going meeting to meeting to meeting, or podcast to podcast, or this, that when we're like triggered by something, we're like, whoa. And then you're like, shit, I would not, that's not how I want to respond. That is not me leading. That giving yourself permission to say, what do I need first as a leader? And then to the other side of what you said is, if something goes awry, giving it space again and taking inventory around, what could I have done differently? What do I own, if anything, and where's my responsibility? And what is not my responsibility? Because it's also, I see a lot of facilitators, and this was something, I have a whole codependent thread in my gene keys and human design. So God knows I've been in this space too often. I either think it's all on me, or I think I have to fix it, or I think I got to apologize to everyone because things got really wonky. And I don't, because I've had people come up and say, Candy, I don't know. And physically, they've watched me at times where I'll drop back. Somebody's in an attack mode, and it's been at my live events. And they're like, it was so, you didn't participate with their energy. You physically like dropped back and made yourself smaller. And I said, I didn't make myself smaller. What I did is I just got into my own power. This person's thing, I just was giving them space to vent. And unfortunately, the more they did that, the more their stuff came out. That had nothing to do with me. And so I was really clear to just back up and drop and let it air out, and then shifted it but I say that because sometimes as facilitators, we get really entangled. Or as leaders, we get enmeshed and entangled in that that high functioning codependency. I mean, I love Terry Cole's work around that, but that high functioning codependent, which says I got to carry all of it. That's and actually don't have to carry any of it.
That's it. And that's the skill. Just as in the facilitation, you're facilitating a community, that is the skill to learn. You know, it's really learning how to really allow yourself to be the hostess of the party, if you will. At the same time, know that you are a sovereign being, they are sovereign beings, and we're all learning together. Yeah. So in this space of being able to hear members, that's the practice, that's like the juice and the deepening of that of this beautiful sacred piece. It's not just like, oh, I hear you, okay, here's customer support. That's like level 1, right? It's literally allowing yourself to be sovereign in the conversation around those things that are bubbling forth from people. And
And I
so,
love the way, and I'm just going to say, I love the word sovereign, but I love how gentle and graceful you say sovereign when my brain's going, look, you're grown ass adults. I'm a grown ass adult. You're a grown ass adult, AKA sovereign being. So I'm just going to translate that for some of you that do not understand the concept of sovereignty. Because I remember when I first started, I'm like, people talk about sovereignty all the time. What actually, sovereignty means you're a grown ass adult who owns your shit. And I'm a grown ass adult who owns my shit. So I'm just saying, because Maruxa says it so beautifully. Like, I love, by the way, if you've not noticed, our energy just is like this ebb and flow of, I'm like, holy shit, bull in a china shop. And she's like, just soft blankets with the silk on the edges that you just want to like, I just love it. But she's like so beautifully expressing sovereignty. And I'm just like, my brain is like, grown ass adult, own your shit, grown ass adult. So I just wanted to throw that out there because, like, legitimately, that is you being a sovereign, knowing that you're a sovereign being, is that you're a grown ass adult owning your shit.
that's it. I love you. I love you so freaking much. Yeah. And this is why we work so well together. You know, like we are this, right? It's my favorite. It's my favorite. Okay, I want to go to the fourth one. This is so fun. I'm like, we're just going. I actually, you know, it's so fun. Let me make a pause here on this. Like, what's that?
I said that's fucking hilarious.
I love it. I love it so much. And I so love this conversation because the truth is I usually only get to like the surface. So this is probably the most I've ever spoken publicly, not, you know, with my private clients. Yeah, we do this all the time, but like publicly, I've never really had an interview like this. So I want to highlight that because this is fun.
Yay, I love it. Well, I love how deep this is going. And hell, if we go on, then we'll just have Brandy split this and make it a two-parter. I don't care.
So let's go in the last one real quick, because the last one I think is also really it's hot and heavy as well. So sacred for number 4 is honored and respected, right? So we have safe, we have seen, heard, honored, and respected. We've already talked a lot about, you know, the boundaries, and where 2 or more people reside, are coming together, there is naturally going to be differences.
Yep.
Right. We just shared one of
AKA conflict. For those of you that are like, we need conflict out of the conversation. Conflict is a difference of opinions. It's a different perspective. And conflict can be good conflict, or it can be really charged negative conflict, which is what most people think it is.
And I want to actually, I'll add to that. I think it's conflict and it's also curiosity and openness.
Yeah.
So it's both and like, because I think that, yes, we can focus just on the negative. It's not negative. That's not the right word. On conflict, the feeling of like, oh, but also I think it's also really just as important to recognize, honor, and respect, like what they are opportunities for us to really see beauty around us. And to see that beauty through our diversity, see that beauty through our differences. And yeah, then there's conflict because we're different, you know, like, and so how does all of that play? Especially when we're creating these beautiful communities with one core idea, maybe one niche, if you will, of people, or, you know, one mindset, one framework, one whatever. How do you make sense of that when you're also in this space of diversity? And that also, I think that is like the final, like the creme de la creme part of the sacred 4 is doing that dance between the concepts and the thought patterns and the belief systems and all the things that we hold dear in creating culture and creating experiences with rituals and things like that when you're creating community. And also, hey, we're just different. How do we do that together? And truly, it is an art. It's a dance. It's an absolute beautiful dance of the both and. Having those boundaries that we've just spoken about earlier, being part of the holder of the container, and also then seeing the beauty in each and every one of us to be able to, because of our diversity, bring in new perspectives, new ideas, creating something that couldn't have been unless that voice was in this space, right? Sure. So I think it's really important to see it from both ends. the both and.
Both and well, it's the and both and all, right? It's like sometimes we think it's this or that, or it's the and both, right? And it's the and all, because there's oftentimes more than just this or that perspective. There's not a black, and we put everything in this context of black and white, when oftentimes it's multidimensional, because that's the aspect of, that's the thing that you were talking about even in the beginning, to bring this kind of a little full circle. Maybe I don't know, we went down rabbit holes. But it's that space of, look, it's a multidimensional interaction that has all of these different facets coming together. So it's not like one piece or this piece and then 1 + 1 = 2. It's like this collective, aspect of more of an exponential equation that's like 1 + 1 = 20. There's these different tentacles that add up to something different, right? Or 1 + 1 = 3, or whatever you want to call it. What I think is interesting, and it's, and again, this may be, we just put a fork in this one and bring it to another conversation. But what's interesting is I have conversations, because we talk a lot about trust and respect, especially in corporate spaces and business environments and those communities. And the dance between trust and respect, can you trust someone you don't respect, and can you respect someone you don't trust, is a question oftentimes that it's interesting to see where that goes. I usually set the preface to say, I don't have a stake in it either way. I'm just really am asking the question to see what comes through. But I also think about that fourth sacred sort of contract that you have for communities, and I'll call it more of a contract than a component, is even establishing what that means. Because one of the things, and I would love your take on this, maybe as we round some things out, that when we say honor and respect, so first of all, I think about your 4 sacred agreements or your 4 sacred contracts inside this space of community. And I think about that in and of itself. So those of you listening, I think that's a perfect way to start to create your container, is to talk about those 4 things. Like the 4 components of our community are equated to this, right? Safety, being seen, feeling heard. Now, here's the opportunity, because again, when you bring in diverse perspectives and people, and this is one of the things I've done in my leadership training in the communities and containers that I've created, is, okay, before we move on and everybody shakes their head and says, okay, get it, safer environment, get it, got to be seen, get it, need to be heard, and get it, honor and respect each other. Everybody's like, okay, we're in agreement. Do you have commitment? And the only way you get commitment is to say, what does that actually mean to you? So before we move on into the work, what is your definition of honor? How do you define it? How does it show up for you? What does it mean in terms of demonstration space? Because what's interesting is you want to set a container. Ask those questions. When you say respect, how do you know you're being respected? How do you know you're offering respect? What are the language? What are the words? It can open up a 3-hour discussion to understand where the conflict is in the underbelly, because people will say words all the time that they're like, yep, I got you, Maruxa, I got it, honor. Yet the way I define honor and the way you define it, even though there's an alignment, there are some fundamental things that either need to be demonstrated or show up differently that are meaningful for me that would be very different for you. And I feel like as facilitators, trainers, leaders, coaches, we rush through that part. We create a container before allowing some breath into that as well. And I think what a beautiful way to set a container for a community than to go through your 4 agreements, your sacred contract, and then to open up space to say, before we move forward, there needs to be a commitment, not agreement, because they're 2 different things. And I love the way Patrick Lencioni talks about that. Agreement is everybody nodding their head, and it's a lot of group thinking, that just a whole world of commitment says, I may not agree with all of it, yet I see how for, and a lot of times when I do that, I will then say, can we come to a consensus that says for the next 3 days in this container, our definition of that word means this, after the group got to input its thoughts around it? Because then you anchor in a commitment that people say, well, that is not necessarily my definition. I understand for the safety of this group, that definition is what we need. And yes, I can get on board with that, which means I'm showing up differently. And again, being, as Maruxa would say, a sovereign being, and as Candy Barone would say, a grown ass adult that owns your shit, showing up from that perspective and leading yourself first.
That's right. I love that. I love that. Yes, and that's such a powerful point, right? When I do my work with my private clients, my one-on-one clients, we literally do that exact process of deepening our understanding. Let's articulate for each of these. I love that contract. I've never said it that way, but I'm going to steal that from you. So you know what I mean? Like I love it. Anyway, so that idea of like understanding what each of those, how that really aligns in for that company, will help everybody that from their first hire, their 10th hire, the 50th, 100th, 500th hire, all the way through to then how it seeps into the experiences that their customers and their clients are having by working with them is everything. And that's why that sacred four is so incredibly critical to creating communities that actually work.
Yeah.
Right. We recently rebranded the entire company to Revolutionary Communities for this exact reason.
Yeah.
We wanted to have communities coming forth from our company that really are inviting humanity to come back into our companies that we work with.
I love that.
The only way to do that is by allowing ourselves as leaders to be coming from the inside out as revolutionaries.
Yeah.
As ones that are willing to create massive transformation in our own lives and hold that with such integrity that we can't help but then have that be exuded out from our brands and from the people and into the people that we're serving.
And see, right there, that's how you shift the level of consciousness and raise the level of leadership right there. Right. I love that. And by the way, steal away, please, because there's a whole lot of your stuff. I'm like, woo, that just like got into some cells. And I'm like, damn, I love talking to you. Because that space of creating that sacred contract up front, I think is really important. And and to make sure that contract is being maintained throughout the life of that container. And for each container, because here's the other thing that I would offer for people. Each container requires a sacred contract. Do not just assume that if the same people are moving from one community to the next, because I know a lot of coaches, especially, get their same communities that do all their programs that do. A sacred contract needs to be created for each. You need to create a container for each community. Do not borrow the energy, because again, and I follow a lot of Priya Parker's work too in the art of gathering, right? Which is everything needs to have a purpose. You must have a why for the gathering, even if it's around a specific topic, which means the dynamics of the container are going to change.
That's it. You're 100% right. Priya is genius at that.
I love her. Love her work.
I love her work too. And it is that. It's allowing ourselves what I call it, slow down to grow fast.
Yep.
We can't design million-person communities. We can't design even 10-person communities well if we don't allow us to invite ourselves into the why, invite ourselves into that slowing down to really articulate and understand, why are we creating this community? Is it just for fun? It's a lot of work for just for fun. It's a lot of energy. You're holding space for heartbeats, live human heartbeats, and souls and beings in a room together. Let's make sure we're doing it well. Yeah.
So let me ask you one last question I so want to play with you some more. So please come back and let's just like put the shit on the table and whatever, just do what we just did, because that was just delicious. So what's your vision? What is your vision for revolutionary communities? Like, what is this vision of what we get to do in light of all we've learned and all we've just talked about, the brilliance of what you just brought forward, even in the Sacred Four and this contract and the space and your definition of community? What is your vision and why that's propelling you into the next?
I love that question. Thank you for asking. My vision is that at the end of my life, that the work that I've been able to do by 90 years old, so I've got, how old am I? 40? I have like 50, almost 48 years left, is that we start to shift humanity big time. that we bring humanity back to the human race
Mhm.
in the midst of technology. And because of technology, there is a way to play and flow with all that's about to show up. I mean, we're working on metaverses. AI is like hot and heavy right now. And there's so much fear around that. And that's just layered on top of being in a world where we were primarily virtual for 3 years or 2 years, right? We've created new habits because of that virtual relationship space. And so for me, my purpose and the reason what I see is that at the end of my life, 555 million people are impacted through the companies in which I get to show how do we design culture well? How do we begin to create experiences that hold our humanity in play and remind us of the good that we are, and the reason that this world can continue to exist and actually even thrive. I don't know if we, at this point when we're in the midst of this recording, we're seeing war and fractionalism, like being the name of the game all around the world. We're seeing our world falling apart with global warming, and all this stuff is showing up. And we're a world right now that's full of anxiety, depression, loneliness, suicide rates are going high. And it's now or never that we make a shift for the better, or else we're going to continue to create habits that are going to continue down this path. So that's my take over the world strategy, is to work with brands and teach these strategies to those brands, to these companies, and to leaders who are willing to revolutionize not only themselves, but also the way in which they hold space for the people that they're serving. And in doing that, I believe, I've proven it over and over again, that profitability gets that much more fun to create.
For sure.
And is still possible.
Well, so, and truthfully, is the only way for sustainable profitability. It is the only, people do not make the connection. And what you need to understand is it is the thing that feeds profitability. It's the thing that feeds it. It's the thing that creates a sustainable trajectory to know it's happening. And it taps us into our divine abundance and ability to create expansion where everything that we need and how to serve is provided for us, because we've created an abundant world that's dialed into these abundant communities that are showing up at their highest and best level, right? And so I love all of that. That's so juicy. Oh, that's so good. So how can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more about what you're doing? They want to learn how to work with you. How do people find you, reach you? I mean, we're going to drop all of this in the show notes, but how do they find you?
Thank you, Candy. So revolutionaryinsiders.com. That's the best way. What that's going to do is you're going to be able to get in on our newsletter. We have a newsletter that goes out every week. It's showcasing communities that are innovating, that are choosing to be revolutionary. The leaders who are choosing to create these revolutionary communities, they're my clients. And then I'll also introduce you to communities and my ideas and thoughts on how to become revolutionary. It's all free. There is nothing to buy unless you want to work with me one-on-one, right? And so that's really it. I give away a lot of my content at this point for free because I said I want to multiply the impact that what I know, that I've been positioned on this planet right now in this time to bring forth, can really start to do that and make more of that impact on the world. So
awesome. And I will tell you, as someone who has seen, experienced, and been a recipient of a lot of Maruxa's energy and gifts, she is not kidding when she puts the best of the best of like her just heart out there. And so if you are not taking advantage of those resources, I don't have words for you. I'm just saying. And so she really has stepped into such a revolutionary space around what communities, as you can hear. I mean, this is a different conversation around what's possible and communities and the power of leadership inside those containers. And again, you can decide if it's calling you forth to be the sovereign being that you are, or the grown-ass adult who takes their own responsibility and shit for their life and is leading themselves forward. And I hope in all of this that you have taken some juicy nuggets, because I will tell you, I am fully activated and like, whoa, I want to shift. Oh my gosh, just buzzing. And so Maruxa, if you had one last thing to offer for our conversation today. By no means is this our last conversation, but for today, if you wanted to just, I don't know, whatever's on your heart, whatever's in the space that feels it needs to be shared, what would it be?
Have fun. We are all truly, truly, truly exhausted in different ways, right? And I think one of the things that I've learned more than anything else over this last year in allowing myself to be revolutionary and bringing out this message. I mean, my branding was totally different just 6 months ago. And it's not about a branding play. It was literally because I'm finally calling in my own truth. But part of the thing that I started to recognize was the play is also in my truth. And I've forgotten that the more I play, the more I can be fully aligned in my courage, fully aligned in being able to bring this forward to life. And so in the midst of all the hard shit that we're going through, in the midst of the serious conversations we're having, where can we play more? What would that look like to play more? That's really coming through for me today. And I want to definitely encourage more of that for all of us.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Many of you know I am remembering how to play, as is our opportunity. So my last piece for everyone is I hope you will choose to get revolutionary, to use Maruxa's word. Hope you will choose to go rogue and choose to be aligned as fuck and let it start in the place of play. So with that, Maruxa, I just want to say thank you. This was absolutely everything and more of what I knew was going to happen. And I just love you so much. I am so virtually squeezing you until I get to see you in person. But you truly are just, you are a badass on every level. And I love you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being
so much too. I love you so much. Mwah. Yes, to more conversations. And thank you for having me.
Oh.